nations now pitching us each month. And on the whole, the large majority, the use case that they want to execute on at the application layer isn't possible because the protocols don't support that particular economic model, right? So what we've currently got are a series of general purpose ledgers that are now fixed ultimately in their economic design. It requires all these forks that are going on to actually make them usable to different use cases. So the focus now, and probably for the next couple of years, should be at the protocol level. It shouldn't really be at the application level. And I think linked to that, as you were saying, the end user should never experience blockchain. It should be invisible. But first you need the plumbing in place, you need the foundations. So whilst there's lots of excitement and hubris around the space, the reality is most of it's just not possible today. It will be possible. I always argue that we've got one of the most exciting brain trusts on the planet focused, all that mental energy is focused on the space. So it will happen, but we need innovations, for example, like IOTA, who looked at the economic framework of something like the Ethereum protocol and said, this will never work for microtransactions, so it will never work for IoT. So they built a protocol from scratch specifically to serve microtransactions and industrial IoT. So on the one hand, general purposes are very good, but they're not going to help people execute at an industry level. And the last thing I'd say is one of the approaches that we champion, we did a white paper on it at Outlier, is around what we call the community token economy. So the idea is blockchains, because they're decentralized technologies, require collaboration, industry collaboration. From the outset. So actually consortia, whilst they're a pain in the arse to run, ultimately are a kind of a necessity to make sure that the kind of standards are in place for that level of adoption.
Yeah, and kind of connecting both their parallels, like the internet's a great example, but and touching on its base protocols, TCP, HTML, all those that eventually led to the creation of Amazon, eBay, and all these applications and platforms and massive companies built on top of them. I'd like to emphasize what kind of Jamie was touching on, that the protocols that we're building right now for the blockchain world, we have the ability to architecture them in a much better way than kind of the base internet was created upon back in the 90s. So this new re-architecturing really at the protocol level we're doing with blockchain will allow applications to be built much more grand and at a larger plethora than what was created on the internet. And I think really, as kind of Jamie touched on, the next few years we need to focus on building up that infrastructure, those core developer protocol plays, to really then be able to build all the infrastructure for large corporations to be able to come in and have a say, start adopting blockchain, build applications on top of it, and really see all the value that can be created. So I think we're kind of in that interim period where really the infrastructure needs to readily be built out and really thought about the best approaches to the architecture of creating them before we jump ahead and have all these large corporations start integrating applications right away.
And I just add to that, I think one of the key points, key distinctions is this is not just about technology. So what we're talking about are an infrastructure that enables us to program monetary and fiscal policy into future digital economies. So these are open source communities, they're building the next digital economies, and we can actually program the economic principles into these. So it's not just engineering from a technological perspective, it's engineering from a crypto-economic design, so the behavioral economics, the game theory that underpins how you want this system to work and behave. And so we've got a unique advantage where we can now program rationality into economics, which is the failing of modern day economics, is it assumes rational behavior in irrational models.
Okay, I would like to actually relate to that. So basically, I think that's a shift in mentality, because blockchain it's not like, basically it's a distributed database, a network that finds the consensus about what the data is, right? But on top of it, we have a store of value. We have the nodes that are, like, they don't have to trust other nodes, and it's totally different from what enterprise is at the moment. And then we have the smart contracts on top of it, which means, okay, I can actually implement my behavior into the smart contract. I can implement my interest there. I can implement the rewards, incur the game theory, and that's entirely, out of the reality of the current economical system. So, for example, if I may ask you, who in your company is implementing blockchain at the moment? Can you raise your hands? Okay, not too many, but congratulations to you. Huge innovation. So on one hand, there is no blockchain implementation. On another hand, we see the ICOs that say, okay, this is like the conventional economical business model, and we are putting it on blockchain, and everybody's like, wow, yet another blockchain, yet another ICO. So probably blockchain is not even needed everywhere, but in a way it's a trigger for the mental shift in the economics.
Okay, if it's not needed right now, we all agree that it's a great technology. We all agree that it can save a lot of time and money. So I think we all agree that it will come. We're not ready yet, but it will come. How do you think that process is going to be? Do you think that they're going to start by themselves? There's going to be a consensus there? What's going to happen in each individual company? How do they take a decision?
I mean, it makes no sense. So one of the kind of values that we provide to our portfolio is we've cultivated a corporate ecosystem largely around certain clusters, smart cities, mobility, Industry 4. And in Europe, and particularly in Germany, there's a huge advantage where the Industry 4.0 scene's been 12, 15 years now, where you get Siemens in a room with Bosch in a room with BMW in a room with Daimler. And really they look at blockchain technologies, it will be a commoditized layer, right? This is not the thing that's going to give them a proprietary advantage. It doesn't work from that perspective. So it kind of forces collaboration. It forces industry adoption, and therefore, I mean, it's fine experimenting with the technology in a silo, but it's never going to, A, be at scale because most of the protocols can't support it at the moment. But secondly, it only works if an industry adopts it. It becomes an industry standard. So open mobility is a really good example. There's no point one mode of transportation being on a blockchain because we travel through multiple modes of transportation. So that requires the whole mobility system, including energy, charging grids, autonomous vehicles, to get together. And we're actually helping form a consortium to do just that. So sadly, it requires a huge scale level of organization and cross-industry collaboration.
One point to add to that is I think that disruptive technology is usually disruptive when it doesn't disrupt human behavior. So the most difficult part is convincing people to change what they're already doing. So if you look at Airbnb or Uber, people still set the date, still use their Visa, so basically people are used to using bank accounts. They're not used to dealing with private keys and public keys. So again, I think from my end, the blockchain technology will properly scale when consumers are basically able to access it more easily.
Yeah, but we said that consumers really don't need to know about the blockchain, right? We just said that the blockchain is there, and the moment it becomes invisible, it will be successful, right? So how do we make those two ends meet?
I would disagree.
Nobody's going to be buying things with a cryptocurrency having to do an exchange in their head, right? So
I would disagree entirely. You can't adopt blockchain without the public and private key, and it's easier to explain what it is indeed versus fooling a user and saying, okay, you've got email and password. We are a decentralized philosophy, but we are storing all your information on our servers. We have private keys on our servers, etc. So we have seen mistakes where when we try to simplify things for user, and we are hiding the essence. And blockchain has a totally different nature.
But you have to understand that. So decentralization is a spectrum. It's not binary, right? It's not centralized or decentralized. And I think this is one of the things that's been really holding back, primarily coming from the early Bitcoin community, that there's this fanatical obsession on decentralization as a philosophy, as a religion, to the point whereby it's unusable. And so I totally agree that things like self-sovereign identity and stuff like that are critical. But at the same time, the UX doesn't mean people have to be, at the moment, most people cannot even use wallets and use exchanges and stuff like that. So I think it's something in between. And ultimately, do we want people to begin to using increasingly decentralized technologies, or do we want to keep forcing down their throat that they have to use things like Bitcoin and stuff? And it's not going to happen.
So, well, we know it very well because we are building the wallet that has to overcome this.
Yeah, no, well, just 1 second, please. You know what's happening? We can't even reach consensus here. That is what is going to happen in the industry. Okay, well, that's the real point about it. Let's go ahead.
And so basically, we are building the wallet that overcomes it, but overcomes through explaining. And like cryptography is essential to blockchain, at least at the moment, and it's going to be like that. And the easiest way is just to explain a person that like you can't send your private key to anybody. Like you have to store it securely.
I have
okay.
I'd like to ask a question, please. Do you think that in 10 years' time it's going to be feasible for a business or my grandfather, for example, if he wants to send a blockchain-based transaction, if he misses one of the, let's say, numbers or letters within the public key, the recipient's key, there is no recourse mechanism at the moment today. So that's one of the things that definitely has to change. I like to look at the example of Tezos. Tezos was creating a protocol to resolve consensus on the blockchain, and then you had a centralized issue within the management. So this, I guess, goes to show that we're still very far away from mass adoption. But to pose a question to you, do you think that it's feasible for someone, if he missed a certain letter or a key within, let's say, a recipient's address, for that amount of value to disappear in thin air? That's, I think, one of the scalability issues going forward where wallets will have to address.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we're getting paid so much, because security matters. In the end of the day, I would like it to be attached to my personality, all right? So I come, the blockchain looks at me, it says, okay, this is Ihor, this is Miguel, I sent money to Miguel, it's all on blockchain. So there is no doubt about me, about Miguel, about this transaction. That would be like seamlessly ideal.
But I think one of the key things to remember is that people adopt new technologies usually because it makes their lives easier. And the reality is, whilst we all care about these things, most people don't, right? And especially younger generations, the idea of self-sovereign ownership of identity and data, actually, to be honest with you, they just want to be, they're very open and transparent. So I think we've got to accept that until the experience is comparable, if not better, than the current solutions, they won't be adopted at mass.
Should be better, yes.
Okay, so the next question would be really just to try to get a little more specific about your views on this, because we're talking always, most of the examples are always with crypto, and transferring money and finance, but the industry is not only about finance, okay? What are the challenges? Let's assume that we reach a consensus, okay? What are the challenges in the real industries?
Well, I think the promoting innovation is the most important. So this blockchain technology is a paradigm shift from what used to be smart systems, where a company like IBM would develop something that's cutting edge, whereas you have dumb systems that I'm a big fan of, where it's a dumb system where it basically invites people to innovate on the edges. And I think once that is in order, when that, let's say, infrastructure is in place, and you have that dumb system where people, smart or like innovative people, create things on the edges, that's how it will grow. But if you have a closed smart system, for example, if a bank implementing its own private blockchain, that will not foster innovation. Whereas public systems where people are contributing from every end, that's how I see it progressing.
And we see it like the oil of 21st century is actually the data, and the blockchain makes it possible to motivate people to share this data with each other. So it's actually for us the most important thing. It's all about sharing, actually, sharing the information.
And data's a good starting point, actually, because again, it's the thing that everybody has too much of. They have too little control. Most organizations that have this data, it's a liability, it's not an asset, because they have to secure it, they can't secure it. So that's why we recently invested in Evenim. Evenim, basically, they start out as an identity solution, but fundamentally what they built is a solution that allows for verifiable claims in a zero-knowledge proof environment. And that's there's some other innovations to it. But fundamentally, what that means is that somebody can ask a question, and I can prove the answer without revealing the underlying data. So I retain the data, self-sovereign, but they still do have systems for recourse, right? So there's still centralized parties in the process, because if you lose control of your identity, that's a pretty big problem, right? So I think really the way to look at meaningful adoption is to think about these things as stacks, right? And you've got to start at the base layer, and that's usually identity, reputation, data, and data. Really interesting use cases happening at the moment where people are combining AI with large data sets. So IOTA basically allows, they're going to be piloting something soon around data marketplaces and basically connecting IoT devices to a marketplace where you can sell or transact or trade that data, which sounds really boring, but ultimately what can be built on top of that is truly innovative. So you could apply AI on top of that to allow for predictive maintenance of machines and all this kind of stuff. So you can get really carried away with all the things that we can do with this new stack, but right now it's how do we unlock the basic value that resides in this world that's pretty much latent, it's unused.
Okay, and what do you think about, because, we need to go back to the basics, okay? But how do you value the risk of new platforms being developed at the same time? Okay, in different countries, in different systems, because we're not going to agree. We're all not going to agree. Somebody might be starting developing something. Some might start developing something some other place. What do you think about the risk of just starting different ways?
I think this is the beautiful thing about the space is that, again, it should all be generally open source. And as we said, that can be open source from experimentation around technology, but it's also experimentation on economic design. So we're going to have this kind of Cambrian explosion of innovation where we're experimenting with different models. And the reality, what I really like about it as an investor, in the conventional startup world, 90% of startups fail, right, in the first 3 years. So you think about all the money that gets poured into these businesses, and most of it's just totally wasted. The company fails, all IP is lost. The really neat thing here is all of this technology is open source. So if one team fails to execute on a particular vision, it, in theory, could be picked up by another team and reapplied. And so I'm kind of open to lots of experimentation, but I do think the challenge at the moment is there's not enough technical talent in the world to realize half the ICOs. And therefore, redundancy, knowingly building the same thing as somebody else that you're going to open source doesn't make sense.
Okay, to add to Jamie's point about how 90% of the ICOs will fail, I
startups fail.
Startups. ICOs. Probably ICOs is basically VC on steroids, I guess. So from the way that I see it is the ICOs that do succeed or the startups that do succeed will become pioneers in the future. So the dot-com bubble involved a lot of people losing loads of money, but it also got us Amazon out. It got some of these unicorns that shape the world that we live in today.
But the important thing is that in the dot-com bubble, the startups failed, all value was lost.
Sure, yes.
I think in the ICO space that won't be the case, right? We'll still be able to get value.
There's something left.
But I think there's a very important aspect that we should focus on in regards to data. People, all right, I'm all for the data bandwagon, and I'm a big fan of that. But there has to be certain filters because the concept of garbage in, garbage out still applies. So if you have the best decentralized blockchain platform, but you're feeding it garbage data, it's not going to serve your purpose. So I think there has to be some type of, let's say, mechanisms to ensure the validity, integrity of the data that's coming in.
If you have sorry to keep jumping in, but so this is what a number of players are looking at. So an IoT device, for example, should have an identity. So things should have identities, and they should have reputations. So basically, how do you trust the data that a device is putting into the network is, not just rubbish or garbage. So as you said, even things, we need a layer of identity and reputation for not just people, but things.
Agreed.
Objects. And
similar to how you have your Uber rating driver, your IoT device is going to have a rating, basically depends on how its performance goes. But I think for IoT, one of the scariest things is the security aspect. If you hack an IoT device that, for example, controls elevators, it could lead to, for example, the malicious activity that could happen in relation to IoT devices could be destructive. So I think the security aspect is one of the areas that needs a lot of focus if it's going to be adopted by the
there are many areas we need to focus in, but going back a little bit to what you were talking about, there's going to be a lot of value but destroyed. Okay, I don't think, it depends, but where's all that money going to come from? Okay, because we need a lot of investment here. Okay, maybe you can give us some view about what's going to drive the investors and the industry and the companies to go for it, to invest that money.
It depends on developers. All of us, we need to work on it. We need to make good products. We need to make good ICOs, and it's going to motivate investors to go into the industry.
I would say blockchain, like ICO is the way for many people to adopt blockchain, at least to start looking into it, like what blockchain is. And then in the end of the day, it just gets to like staking and storing the value in those databases, and more things just gonna get tokenized. Like the buildings might go tokenized, everything around.
Let Chris speak.
Yeah. I just think funding-wise, you need to fund the projects that really support the community, support these open source protocol plays that allow this kind of interconnectivity web of countries from different sides of the planet to be able to connect together. Kind of back to touching what you were on a second ago, when centralized organizations are maybe building blockchain applications and they're privately set up and such, sure, that can create short-term cost savings and efficiencies in their business, moving their databases onto the blockchain. But long-term, that's not really what the vision is, and that's not really what the technology should be used for. So as you start looking at all these open source protocols out there, one goes down, the rest of them are all still working. All these new businesses now, like for an example, like in the stock market, imagine a few protocols are built, a lot of businesses spin out of them, and say I'm in the US and I want to trade my share of Apple stock or sell it to someone in China. These open source protocol plays, the interconnectivity web they're creating will allow that to happen. And you're just, these kind of centralized ideas are starting to move away from the hands of these large corporations into the hands of the users themselves and into the consumers.
So the killer app, so far anyway, the killer app for blockchain technologies is the ability to tokenize, fractionalize, and securitize or financialize, depending on how you want to term it, the world, right? And at the moment we're doing it with open source protocols. And if you think about it, for the first time ever, the only reward for making cool open source technology was ego, right? You get to put your name to it. Now, for the first time, you can actually make profit from open source technology, which we should not underestimate. The second thing is that if you think about what that means, because of the fractionalization, anybody anywhere in the world, in theory, can participate in this next wave, the next web. So previously that was the reserve of a few people in Silicon Valley in the last two cycles. Now, and that's a pro and a con, right? Everybody can participate. I had a cab driver that I was talking to, and he's like buying Bitcoin just earlier. So is that good or a bad thing? Let's see. But fundamentally, everybody could have a very early stake in the next Amazon. And for me, that's what's really exciting about it.
So 2 points. You said where is the money going to come from, and Jamie said whether it's good or bad. I definitely think it's good because blockchain technology is the first type of technology where you're able to actually invest in the technology itself. If you were going to have the chance to participate in Amazon in the late 90s, you would have had to be part of that closed circle, as Jamie said, within Silicon Valley. But blockchain technology promotes the concept of financial inclusion, where anyone across the world can easily invest in a company, and I definitely think it's a good thing. Today you have how many billion people across the world? Maybe less than 25% actually have banks. So promoting the concept of financial inclusion is one of the most noble causes that I think will end up pushing blockchain technology and distributed systems to prevail.
And by the way, it's not just speculators, right? So in theory, you can enter the system as a developer, you can commit to an ICO project, because by the way, most ICOs don't have employees, right? They have people that contribute to the protocol and through bounties and stuff like that. And it's a very fluid labor market. They can go and work somewhere else if they get bored with the protocol. And they can earn a stake in that system by contributing value that can be a monetary form. So they can enter this new financial system without actually staking any capital. It can just be the contribution of value. So if you think about what that means in terms of better distributing the wealth that's going to be coming from this ecosystem, I think that's going to be really important.
Okay. Seems like we keep talking about like finance and blockchain in the financial world, so most probably that's the best application whatsoever. I tried to implement blockchain in the logistics industry, and I can tell that was a horror when it gets to explaining business owners how it's going to change, the entire operations in the logistics. So essentially, blockchain by itself is it's a stream of data. So it's like you can log anything there, and then on top of it, you can build all different applications that use the raw data, a lot of raw data, and put it into anything valuable. And this is such a great change from what systems are right now that I can easily see blockchain implemented in 5 years, 10 years, but not now.
With the logistics, was that a private blockchain, or was it an open source ledger you were trying to get them to adopt?
First private, so we came there through event sourcing, through realizing that huge industries can be only put on something which is called event sourcing, where basically you save all the industry events that happen. If you're automating the logistics, you have to put the data about what happened with the driver, with the truck, with loads, with customers, and it all just goes as a raw data in a timeline order. It has no meaning in it, nothing, it's just a data. And it's not how they do it nowadays. Nowadays they record everything in crude, and if you changed anything, changed the state, then the previous state disappeared. And switching from that to event sourcing where, okay, this state matters, so we'll save this event to have the state forever. The state changes, we still have the access to the older state, we can always roll back and see what happened in the past, what the present situation would be. For example, in the past, other events would happen. And you can model your new realities, you're getting to quantum computing in a way, and the business is just not there. It's not there yet.
Sometimes you just need to keep trying.
Maybe, yes.
The reason why I asked, kind of coming back to the main framing of the panel, is that we've been investing in this space for just under 5 years. For the first 3 years, we saw lots of startups that were trying to build proprietary technologies in effectively an open source environment, and nobody would adopt it, right? What we're now seeing is through tokenization, people are open sourcing the technologies, and we're seeing that a lot of industries are more comfortable in adopting it for a number of reasons. So the first one is that they're not reliant upon one entity to control effectively their key infrastructure. The second one is that even if the team behind it fail, they can still use that technology and they can still build upon it. They can build their own. They're not dependent upon one technical team. And the third one is that really it becomes more of a standard. So the technology is just a commodity. Nobody's directly trying to make money from it, and it enables a standard. And we're seeing that it's facilitating much greater industry adoption than when people previously went with this proprietary technology and tried to charge them a licensing fee.
Okay, centralized system.
We just got a few more minutes. Okay,
so just a quick point. I don't personally buy the hype behind centralized blockchains, because that is more or less an Excel file or a ledger where we've had since the days of the pharaohs, where they basically write on their papyrus paper and then record the final entry on the next paper. So the blockchains will only bring value if they're decentralized. I don't necessarily buy the hype regarding anything that is centralized and controlled by one entity.
Okay, yesterday we were asked by a very wise man to end our discussions with a summary, okay, and some words of wisdom and prophecy. So I would please request you to just in 30 seconds, 1 minute, it's just a couple of sentences that summarizes your opinion and how you see the near future.
How I see the new world. Sorry?
You see a new world, the thing.
I think we should support not only the open source code, we should also support open-minded people. We should all be open-minded. We should all share information with each other. This way we could progress. This way we could see the progress coming much faster into the planet, and that's what we need right now. In the freedom and that's what people need. Freedom of information. That's what makes people free.
We've got a great team behind.
I would relate to that as well. I would say that blockchain is two components, technology and mentality. technology is easier, mentality is what we have to work on.
Yeah, I'd say based on kind of everything we've talked about, the most important thing is really educating the community and funding these projects that, or maybe even creating new programs that educate everyone. Because right now, looking at, say, having the option to invest in the first Amazon back in the day, your average person doesn't understand the risks associated with venture capital investing, which is essentially what this is, right? Investing in ICOs. And they don't understand that they're likely, very high chance they're going to lose their money and this project's going to die in a few years. So I think the most important thing we need right now is educating all the masses so that they're very aware of what's going on right now and the best approaches to dealing with it in the future.
Jamie?
You got no clap.
No clap? Guys? Don't take sides.
Don't do that to me.
Yeah.
I get clap. So I'd say, thanks, before I've even done it. So I think there's two things that need to be said, and it's understanding the kind of conflict or the tension between those two things. So on the first hand, no, this is the next phase of the web, right? So this is Web 3, and we're talking about a shift from centralized human-mediated systems to decentralized on the spectrum, peer-to-peer environments. And this is going to be totally transformational. It's going to enable all kinds of degrees of autonomy and self-sovereignty. So it's really, really transformational. It's going to touch almost every industry. At the same time, everybody's very excited. I have the hype cycle, and I call it the bullshit cycle, right? And we're kind of peak bullshit at the moment. So everyone's really excited, rightfully so, because it is the next phase of the web. But the reality is the technology is just not there today to deliver on a lot of this promise. So, we need as an industry to be able to help manage expectations. So yes, this is going to change the world, but it's going to happen slowly, pragmatically. It's not going to be a big disruption tomorrow.
Right. I'll find it.
Oh, he got two.
All right. I think I'd like to end with a quote from one of the smartest people to ever basically change the world, Bill Gates. He said that basically we overestimate the effect technology is going to have on the world in the coming 1 year, but we always underestimate the effect it's going to have within the coming 3 to 5 years. So kind of building on what Jamie said, where you won't have, if one day blockchain is all across the world, I do think that being the internet of money, it is going to do to financial intermediaries what the internet did to news outlets. So
Okay.
a lot of let's say financial institutions and intermediaries will find it very difficult to survive in the coming couple of years.
Okay, just to summarize it, and then we start with some questions. Yesterday... Oh, yeah, that's right, sorry.
I thought you guys forgot.
Yesterday, here it was said that Dubai believes in creating the future, not waiting for it to happen. So right now it seems like we've taken a step back, just being really, really careful, but I think we'll make it happen. So, some questions? Anybody? Well, there's a lot of questions, right? Okay. Where's the mic?
I'll ask, I think the call is too small for me to shout in. I have one observation and two questions. My first observation goes to Talal. You talked about the financial inclusion. Necessarily, your idea is that it is an opportunity for a lot of people to invest in it. But to my mind, financial inclusion means doing good to humanity, equitable distribution of wealth, and bringing the poorer section of the society to our section. And that's why in my initial comment I said that blockchain should do good to the common people. So that's one observation. My next question goes to Jimmy. Jimmy, I'm making a very controversial question. Please excuse me for that.
I love controversy.
We have heard about, in these 2 days, lots about blockchain technology. I, in my comment, also made one point that any technology by itself should be a business proposition, which your panel has also covered quite a lot about it. But I do think that blockchain is soon going to be commoditized as a technology and move from blue ocean to red ocean. So its life is too short. Before you answer this question, I'll just put another question and then stop. It's coming to Ihor. You are an architect, so you answer my questions, and that to an architect of cryptocurrency. Name 3 critical areas, just 3 critical areas where regulation should come.
All right, mine wasn't a question, but since it was an observation, I think I'd like to respond to that. I think financial inclusion does not mean only investing, but basically banking the unbanked. That is one of the ways that I think blockchain technology will. Today, this whole world economy is based on a small percentage or small fraction. So similar to how we're only using a portion of our brain, we're actually only using a portion of the world to contribute to this economy. So that has to change.
Yeah, so I mean, I've, as I said, we've spoken to a lot of startups. I think in total 1,200 startups, blockchain startups, from Japan to Kenya in the last almost 5 years. And for the large part of that, most of them were, as I was saying, trying to build these proprietary businesses from what is effectively an open source technology base. And you know, I was always convinced, and still am, that there is, you know, there's value in it, but there's only value in it if everybody can use it. And therefore, I think the saving grace, this kind of tokenization that's come through the beginning part of this year, has enabled people to address that tension. All of a sudden, not only can they directly incentivize network effect and have adoption, but they don't need to worry about selling that technology, because normally in startup world, success is selling it to somebody else. Well, these protocols can't be bought now, which is really good, by the way, because normally big corporates buy to kill. They don't buy to make it work. They say, this looks slightly dangerous, let's buy it, put it in the drawer somewhere. So I think that where we're now at, for me, it's a really beautiful phase in the blockchain world, because everybody who's working very hard, building really wonderful technology, can make money and open source it. And so for me, that means it can be a commoditized layer, and everybody can still make a decent revenue.
I'll just, before he answers, I'll just make the comment that the point which you have said, Talal, and what Jamie is saying, blockchain can never be commoditized as long as it starts touching the common people. It's not only unbanking, it's many things there. And before the next technology comes, blockchain will be definitely sitting underneath swarm computing. And once swarm computing comes, blockchain will do wonders. That's my observation. Yeah.
All right, so the 3 innovations that I think have to happen.
Areas of regulation.
Of innovation.
Regulation.
Okay, I first thought innovation, and I thought, okay, regulation has to be one of them, because regulation will actually get blockchain to the masses. It will help us trust blockchain more. Like, blockchain itself has to be trustless, right? But there is a lot of like intentionally negative behaviors on blockchain, hack attacks, etc., which I think just stop a lot of people from using it. So one of the regulations is indeed about, like, it has to be self-regulated, and there is obviously hype about like tokens and ICOs, I think, and the way to get it to a more scalable level where every company is able to launch their token is basically by marrying the smart contracts with some KPIs and your rewards with KPIs, etc., and make it like more relevant to real business. So ideally, I would like to get into the coffee shop tomorrow. I love the coffee shop. I think it's gonna do even better. I'm buying their tokens. As simple as that.
Okay. So 2 more questions will be taken. Yeah. Ladies first, please.
Hi, my name is Arzu. I kind of feel like an outsider here because I'm at point 0. Many of the things that you talk about doesn't mean anything to me. Sorry to say that. Chris was talking about masses, educating the masses, and I am the mass. I am the common person. Actually, my company tasked me. I am working as a strategy manager, and this blockchain was one of the technologies that we identified that we should close the gap between our organization and the technology. and I am here to educate myself. And I want to ask Chris, since you're coming from the venture capital world, to help me to define how can I see that it's too early. I'm here too early. There is a gap between my organization and the approaching technology that's going to affect everything about my business. How should I get prepared from today?
Yeah. So you're not too early to start learning. I'd argue less than 100 experts in the world right now in the blockchain space, and I think some interesting programs I've seen. I'll get back to how we can help you, but I've seen programs at universities in the U.S. start creating crypto economics classes, and that's even a major you can take. You can minor in now at Stanford. So basically, teaching people what crypto economics means, and integrating that into teaching programs at the youth stage, that will help inspire them to start getting active in this community as they grow up. So that's one little point there. But with regards to helping you, there are just so many resources out there online. But I would pinpoint it down to, I have an email I send family and friends every time they want to understand what blockchain is. There's a great bit of primer on blockchain articles out there. Chris Bernitzky's book, Crypto Assets, just came out this week. Great overview of the entire industry, and I honestly think that's going to end up becoming like the blockchain Bible when people start getting into the space. There's a number of links I'd be happy to link up with you on and send you after this. But yeah, GitHub, Twitter, Reddit, all those are great sources as long as you're following the right influencers. Find the top maybe 50 most knowledgeable people in the blockchain space, follow them on maybe a new Twitter account, and just follow their activities, read their Medium articles. That's really the best way to get a strong understanding. And then one last thing is familiarize yourself with the key concepts in both the Bitcoin and the Ethereum based white papers. I think that's a good starting point for understanding the terminology. There's a documentary that came out last year, Banking on Bitcoin. That's a good kind of hype movie, but at the same time, a good educator for understanding Satoshi Nakamoto's incentive behind creating the whole thing, and how it kind of, not just blockchain started becoming popular in 2009 after the 08 financial crisis, but also because there was the big developer crisis of all these developers online that were fed up with getting banned from, maybe they created an add-on to Facebook or some platform and they got banned from using it. There's a big push of developers that got angry at the same time that the 08 crash happened, and that's kind of what really springed it together. And some of those historical details, if you look back in the 90s and the early 2000s and start with kind of the Bitcoin white paper, the Ethereum white paper, I think those are some good starting points.
There's a TED Talk by Mr. Don Tapscott, which is 18 minutes long. I think that's probably the best way to start.
Great.
One advice, just watch YouTube. That's the simplest way, and there are all the answers.
Honestly, I thought that what is it going to mean for the organization? Because it's going to have an effect on the organization, and I want to prepare my organization for that change to come. One of the things is that it will force all of the organizations to stop cheating. It will be so hard for a lot of organizations to cheat now, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the traceability and the transparency that it brings. So that is going to have a cultural impact on the organization, right? There are so many other things that as an insider you would be seeing. It's going to change the organization. It has an implication into the organization. And what those might be, so that I could start planning from today, that I am ready when the technology hits me.
If I could so the way to think about it is how will this affect your industry rather than your company? Because the impact, disruptive or transformative or whatever, will be at an industry level. And I always say there are three things you need to understand if you want to understand this whole space, because you're clearly a bright person, you have a lot of experience in your organization. Once you get hold of the three key concepts, you will connect the dots yourself. Nobody else will connect them for you. So distributed ledgers, permissioned, unpermissioned, smart contracts, cryptographically secure tokens. Get your head around those three things and it'll be so obvious. I guarantee you.
Okay, we'll take the last question, please.
Thank you, Miguel, for amazing panel. So it was very interesting to hear and very actual. First of all, my interest is about the real business on blockchain, because I care about adoption, first of all. So yeah, consensus is a very important topic when you're talking about real business, especially if you want to be something disruptive, if you want to be something big, something innovative and mind-changing. So from the real sector, we have here Ilya. So you are making the real business. There are lots of blockchains on travel at the moment. Even Amadeus, like GDS system, is making its own blockchain. I think Airbnb, Uber, and Booking.com will build their own blockchains for sure. And also we'll have thousands more blockchains for the travel. If you want to build a big business, how would you reach consensus with all those blockchains?
Please be quick.
We believe that all blockchains are going to be connected in the future. For example, there is this project EOS, and it is made to connect all the blockchains between each other. And yeah, that's how we see it.
I think just one quick point about that, the concept of interoperability. So for example, if I have a blockchain to verify digital identity, I want that digital identity verification to link with something that involves with payments, something to involve with healthcare. So as long as they're operating in silos, you won't be able to extract any value. Going forward with concepts or like protocols like the Aeon or Nuco protocol that allows blockchains to speak one another, I think once that is in order, you'll see a lot more value being extracted from, and to answer your question, businesses, building big businesses or successful businesses based on that will require more than one functionality of the blockchain.
Okay, as you can see, there's a lot of things to do. There's a lot of work to do, so let's do it, okay? Thanks a lot for being here. It's been great talking to you.